and welcome to the 24th Annual Red Stegall Cowboy Gathering, who allows us to be a part of his event. And we're all proud to be mixed up together, and we're so happy that you're here. The Trail of Fame was founded in 1996. I think its founding father and inductee is here today somewhere, Mr. Alan Short. And Alan, I know you're here and you always come back. He had to move down to Houston, Texas, but we want to thank him for everything that he's done, and we're still trying, Alan, in case you didn't know. It was founded in 1996 to honor those individuals who have made a significant contribution to our Western way of life. Throughout the walkways of the Fort Worth Stockyards National Historic District, 172 bronze markers have been placed in recognition of their achievements. These markers are patterned after a Frontier Marshal's badge and are inscribed in the honorees' names, and you can walk all over the stockyards and see them in our sidewalks. The inductees today join such great men and women as Goodnight, Loving, Juana Parker, Henrietta King, Bill Pickett, Charlie Russell, and Red Stegall. There are some other inductees here today that I know I won't get around. I haven't seen everybody. I have seen Jim Lane and Steve Murray, and I apologize for not having everybody's list who showed today, but those guys are always coming back, and thank you very much for what you have contributed. Trail of Fame reaches out to the youth of Texas by creating school video programs. We have speakers that go to the classrooms and show these videos and teach these children about the Western way of life and these great folks. Along with partnerships with Imagination Celebration, the Texas Lakes Trail, that lead us into the school programs and help us to teach our mission and our goals. We also travel into those other communities along with those partnerships, teaching of those values and of those people. Today, I want to give a very special thanks to a very special group, the Dorothea Leonard Foundation, who make a lot of this possible. We don't raise money throughout it constantly, but today I'd like to let you know if you'd like to contribute, by golly, there's somebody here that would take your check. And also a wonderful woman who leads, I guess the air show's taking over here. Anyhow, I want to thank our good friend and our biggest benefactor, Tootie Harkins. Tootie, I don't know where you are, but I know there she is right there, yeah. Thank you, Tootie. I want to thank our board of directors, the guys that work all year long to make this event happen and to help keep those other activities that we do to help educate. And the school program up and down the streets here in the stockyards are just magnificent. It's fun. They do all kind of games with them and etchings. It's really a lot of fun and heartwarming. But anyhow, I want to thank Clara Ruddle for all she does. She does a great job. George Westby, Doug Harmon, and Jack Edmondson for all the work that they give and the things that they do for the Texas Trail of Fame. Yeah. Anyhow, I'd like to ask you all to rise, if you would, please, and welcome to the stage Bob Holmes is going to give us our Pledge of Allegiance.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With our Texas flag, honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Yeah.
And now George Westby is going to lead us in our prayer.
Thank you. Before we do that, I want you to look up, not up there, but right up here, and see Molly, the symbol of Fort Worth. That is the original Molly. Do you see it? Anybody wave? Got it? Okay. Now, me, oop. If you would bow with me. Heavenly Father, we gather here today as servants of our community, trying to preserve our history. For it is learning from the past that enables us to improve our future. And Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day and ask you to be with us here and bless this 2014 induction ceremony of the Texas Trail of Fame. These individuals here today, in the memory of those who have passed, have not buried their talents, but have used them for good and have improved the lives of many others. They have helped create and or preserve our Western way of life, and so we honor them. Please keep the men and women that are protecting our freedoms safe, both here and overseas. Keep them safe from harm, and bring peace and comfort to the loved ones of those who have given their all. Please protect the police and the firefighters that put their lives on the line for us every day. And God bless America, and please add a little extra blessing for our beloved Texas. In thy holy name we pray, O Father. Amen. You may be seated. Doug, I guess, is next. It's right here. Here we go.
Doug Harmon will start our induction ceremony.
Well, what a wonderful day to be here, and I can't imagine a better environment than doing this during the Red Steagle Cowboy Gathering, and so many people make this happen. So let us begin. The first inductees is a group of people, the Comanche Code Talkers. And I think this is one of the wonderful things about the event today, is a way of honoring what a group of people did to protect our nation. And yet this group probably is only now getting the recognition that they have long deserved. From about 1740 to 1875, Comanches fought the Spanish, the Apaches, the Mexicans, the Texans, the Texas Rangers, and the U.S. Cavalry for what is basically this whole big part of Texas. And so finally in 1874, they fought their last battle at Paladura Canyon. And under the leadership of Quanah Parker, the last group to surrender at Fort Sill, he took them there in 1875. And at that time, the Comanches lost their identity as a warrior because they were held in the reservation there in that area. Then the warrior identity returned when the opportunity, if you want to put it that way, of World War I. And it was during World War I that 60 Comanches served the U.S. military. And it was during this time that a few of them were actually code talkers helping the military in that front. But the code talking kind of language was really not developed till later in World War II. But the irony of this whole situation is that the Comanches were drawn out to help the military by using their language. And yet at that time, most of the schools that they attended forbid them from using their language. So just think about that. And also, at the time in World War I, they were not citizens of the United States. So this is kind of telling several stories about our America at that time. The Germans were in World War I were not able to understand what the Comanches were saying. And if they could pronounce the Comanche names, that would be a great step in itself. So anyway, that helped them really deal with the privacy that they needed with their talking. 217 Comanches served in the military during World War II. The U.S. Army handpicked 17 Comanches and trained them as code talkers. And it was at this time they developed the language. In fact, one of the great kind of interesting things is reading about because at the time that Quanah Parker was fighting the cavalry, there weren't tanks, war tanks. There weren't machine guns and things like that. So they had to create the language that related to what the Comanches knew, and that's where the tank was the turtle, and the machine gun was the sewing machine. So it fitting that to their language that was so successful. Under the 4th Infantry Division, this group of code talkers went forward and, in fact, went forward at Normandy and then served through the entire European campaign. And they earned 5 battle stars, each of them, during that time. None of them were killed. Some were injured during the fighting, but they all survived. One of the things that is kind of important to recognize is the fact that their recognition or recognition of them has come so late. But a number of people that have been involved, in fact, one of our speakers in just a moment was one of those, along with many other people, including Ben Tomakara, as well as Kay Granger, and many others who introduced, starting in 2002, legislation that would honor them with the highest civilian medal, the Congressional Medal. And so that in 2008, actually 22 were given that honor. And we're sorry that Kay Granger cannot be here because she was so integral in getting that legislation finally passed. So at this time, I would like to introduce Lenora Parker, daughter of one of the World War II Comanche code talkers and a granddaughter, I think I've got that right? Great-granddaughter, yeah, sorry. You don't, yeah, you really, she looks wonderful for being just a granddaughter. But anyway, she is going to read the names of the code talkers. And that's because I can't pronounce the names, that's for sure. Lenora.
World War I, Calvin Atchevit, George Clark, Gilbert Conawoop, Edward Naquati Sr., Samuel Tabitotsevit. World II, Charles Chibetty, Haddon Kadina, Robert Holder, Forrest Casnavoid, Clifford Otataiva Sr., Wellington Mycoby, Edward Naquati Jr., Perry Noibad, Simmons Parker, Melvin Purnam Sioux, Elgin Red Elk Sr., Roderick Red Elk, Larry Sawpetty, Anthony Tabitite, Morris Tabiechi, Ralph Nonai, Willis Yakashai.
Actually, if the Germans heard that, that would sure have scared them in World War II, that is for sure. And at this time, it's my honor to introduce Donna Wani, who on behalf of Chairman Coffey is going to make some comments. And she is Director of Special Projects for the Comanche Nation of Oklahoma.
Well, it certainly is an honor and a privilege to be here this morning, and it just makes my heart swell with pride to see so many of our Comanche members here. Not only do we have our Miss Parker back here behind us, but I noticed right here on the front row we have several more of our Comanche Code Talker descendants. And ladies, if you guys would stand up, and if I could get all of our Comanches that are here in attendance today, if you would please stand. Come on, Comanches, be proud. You know, the Code Talkers played such an integral part in American history, and I was fortunate enough to go with our descendants and our Code Talker families to Washington, D.C. last November when we received the Congressional Gold Medal on their behalf. And it was such a long time coming, so to speak. There were so many tears in the audience. You could feel the spirit of those code talkers there amongst each and every one of us. And it was such a heartfelt time for everyone, and such a proud moment for each and every one of us that were there in attendance. But if I could get Mr. Baker to come up, please. I have a few things that I would like to present to you.
Come on, Doug, you get
I have a proclamation from Chairman Wallace Coffey, and unfortunately, due to a conflict of interest, he was unable to be here today. But it says, whereas the Comanche Nation is a sovereign nation of free and independent people, and whereas the Comanche Nation is proud of our ancestors who, through their love and devotion to their way of life, have established an international reputation as Lord of the Plains, and whereas the Comanche Nation believes that the Comanche Code Talkers have upheld the dignity of our ancestors by distinguishing themselves as warriors during World War I and World War II, whereas the Comanche Nation hereby acknowledges the Board of Directors for inclusion of the Comanche Code Talkers in the Texas Trail of Fame and the walkways of the Fort Worth Stockyards National Historic District. And now therefore I, Wallace Coffey, Chairman of the Great Comanche Nation, do hereby proclaim that the Board of Directors of the Texas Trail of Fame be recognized in honor and hereby presented the Texas Trail of Fame, the Certificate of Appreciation, given under my hand and seal of the Comanche Nation this 25th day of October 2014, Wallace Coffey, Chairman.
Thank you.
I have a few other items as well. When we went to Washington in November, we received, on behalf of all of the Comanche Code Talkers, the nation received the Congressional Gold Medal. Each of our families received a duplicate silver medal. The nation also received a group of replica bronze medals, and on behalf of Chairman Coffey, the Comanche Nation Business Committee, and the Great Comanche Nation, we would like to present the Board of Directors a duplicate bronze medal of the Congressional Gold Medal.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm not finished. We would also like to present to you a Comanche Nation flag as friends of the Comanche Nation for here and forevermore, and we would ask that you please display your flag proudly. And on behalf of the Great Comanche Nation, we would also like to present to you a commemorative Comanche Nation Pendleton. It's a limited edition signed by Chairman Wallace Coffey.
Thank you so much. Oh, I get that? I can't yell like that. Oregon.
There's your box. Let me take that back and hold on to it for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I can. I'll fold it for you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
very welcome.
On behalf of the Texas Trail of Fame, we're mighty proud to have you here, and thank you very much for those wonderful gifts.
I think we should insist that that Hub wear that blanket all weekend. I think that would be good. So, the next inductee is one of those figures out of the West that's almost unbelievable, and that's Stagecoach Mary Fields, and she broke all the boundaries of race, gender, and age. It was an incredible story, and she began. She was an orphan, she was a slave, and after the Civil War, she went to work for a convent, and that group moved then to Montana, and she was very important in building the convent and the school. And the school actually educated Native Americans. And in fact, the Native Americans loved Mary Fields and gave her a special name. They called her White Crow. She acts like a white woman, but has black skin like a crow. And so she was a very endearing person, yet on the other hand, she was a very powerful, prominent person, over 6 foot tall, carried a couple 6-shooters and other weapons to protect everybody. Thank you. He doesn't have the blanket on. So everyone encourage him to wear the blanket. Well, anyway, she, one of the bishops was not very kindly to some of her strong language, and eventually she was dismissed from the the church school and the convent. And she, for a brief time, had a cafe. But she was so intent on making sure everyone got food, the cafe did not make money. So she left the cafe business. And then this is when her incredible skills with horses came in, when she applied for a job with the U.S. Postal Service. And she was able to hitch 6 horses on a stagecoach faster than anybody else. And so she then, from Cascade, Washington, throughout that region, delivered the mail, delivered people for the U.S. Postal Service, and was one of the first African Americans to work for the Postal Service, and first women. So she really, it was incredible records that she had. Anyway, we are delighted that Bob Ray Sanders, our own local historian, and sometimes, well, he writes editorials in the Star-Telegram that really get juices going. So he's a really, really wonderful guy. So I'd like Bob Ray to come up, and I don't think he's directly related to Stagecoach Mary, but he might have been. Bob Ray Sanders.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everybody. No, I am not related by blood to Stagecoach Mary, but I rise and proclaim today that I am kin to her. I am connected to her. I am related to her in so many other ways. I am part of her family, and I stand as part of her family today as you honor her, because as you honor her, you honor a lot of other people who were pioneers and never got the recognition that they deserved when they should have gotten it. Just like we're talking here. We got some great people out there who are going to be honored today, and including my good friend Joe Dooley, and I'm so proud of him, I don't know what to do. And Ben, you know, how proud I am of you. So I just want everybody to understand this, that just because we have different skin color, or we are different genders, or whatever, we are family. Mary is part of the family. And so when I think of her, and as Doug pointed out, you know, as the old folk in my family would say, you know, she was a pistol-toting mama. She was tough, but she was also caring. She had an incredible legacy, and I would hope that you will continue to tell her story, pass it on, and if you will, pass it down, because everybody should know her. So on behalf of Mary's family, all over this country, connected over time and over place, we say thank you for this great honor. Thanks, Doug. And I get to keep the plaque?
Well, we'll talk about that. Thank you, Bob Ray, and really appreciate your interest and support for the heritage of our country, of our state, and our community. Well, the next honoree, Joe Dooley, is another one of these incredible figures, because I am delighted to introduce him, because he was one of the early people that I met here, and I think it was actually at the White Elephant Saloon where I met him, and Jim Lane, I think, had a permanent seat there that he had to fill, and it was there that actually I met Ben Tomakera. But Joe Dooley came to the stockyards in the mid-'70s. That's not 1870s, 1970s. And at that time, and I'm sure some of you old-timers can really testify to this, the stockyards then was not like what it is today. But through the work of Joe and his friends and partners, they were determined to make this a heritage tourism location. And so he opened up with his partners in 1976 the White Elephant Saloon, which of course is one of the most famous names you know, in Fort Worth history. And actually, you look at Joe and you say, how did this guy run a saloon for 20-some years? I mean, he looks too quiet and too serene to have done that. But maybe that's why he looks quiet and serene, is because he did it for 25 years or more. Anyway, Joe brought together the group that not only bought that building, but a number of other buildings, and hoping to generate more interest in the stockyards, which was a big challenge at that time. a lot of the local people wouldn't come down here. So what you see today in terms of the thousands of people that come through here is a dramatic change in what the Stockyards was at that time. In fact, they ran for many years several gift shops, including the Stockyards drugstore on the corner there of Exchange and Main. Now, I don't know whether the H3 has better food than what the drugstore did at that time, but in any case, it's a very significant corner right across the street from the restaurant. But he also used the facility to bring live theater to the Stockyards. Upstairs at the White Elephant hosted Hip Pocket Theater, Jubilee Theater, Fort Worth Theater, Stage West, and melodrama groups over the years. He was also a leader in really everything that went on in the Stockyards over that time, and was also chairman of the Fort Worth Convention and Visitor Bureau, and he had to suffer under when I was president of the Bureau that time, so I apologize for all that stress. But Joe Dooley, please come up, and we're honored to be recognizing you.
First, I'd like to thank Doug Harmon and the Texas Trail of Fame Board for this honor. I know I don't deserve all the credit because I had a great group of investors. They had faith in me and in the projects that we were trying to do to breathe new life into the Stockyards. And over the years, I had a staff of good employees who all played their parts in keeping our businesses running 7 days and 7 nights a week. It's really encouraging to look around this morning and see so many people at the Stockyards. In 1976, when we opened the White Elephant Saloon, a really big Saturday night was 40 people. 4 of our original investors are with us today: Jane Slansker, Buddy Thomas, Shirley Daniel, and Steve Murrin. And my son and daughter, Joe T. Dooley and Carolyn Dooley Smith, are here. These are the 2 kids who covered any situation by saying, "What do you expect, Dad? We were raised in a saloon." Carolyn Murrin Dooley was there at the beginning and always supportive, and Mary Dooley later helped me figure out when it was time to turn things over to younger people. Thank you all for being with me here today. I'd especially like to thank Steve Murrin for introducing me to the Stockyards and convincing me of the importance of saving them. And thanks to Don Edwards, who in the beginning used to sing for us 5 nights a week at the White Elephant. He deserves a lot of the credit for bringing people out to the Stockyards for their first time. My group's investments may not have been large, but I think the things we did were a stepping stone in the redevelopment of the Stockyards and helped to attract the attention of people who came after us, like Billy Bob Barnett and Holt Hickman. And I hope those who follow will continue to maintain the area's authenticity so it will always remain a National Historic District. Thank you for this honor. I deeply appreciate it.
Let me present you with the
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for all you did. Thank you. Really, the Joe Dooley story and the story of everyone around him, I think is something that we should be thinking about for the future, because it was authenticity, it was entertainment, it was and heritage. These were all the things that they kept. So congratulations and thank you for all what you have done. The next honoree was, I mentioned him already. Actually, he was I met him at the White Elephant, and I think the later in the night it got, the conversation flowed very freely. And so you had all of these ideas that came out of it. I think the herd, I think, was actually created, or the idea was incubated, I should say, with after, I don't know, 1 or 2 beers maybe. But anyway, the next honoree is Ben Tamakera. And I'll never forget meeting him there at the White Elephant. And I looked at him and, what a big man and what a gentle man. And then I learned what a man committed to his heritage. He is the great-great-grandson of Quanah Parker, but from my standpoint, he is one of the people of the Comanche Nation that has been most important in bringing the heritage forward to many generations. And Ben, I'm just so proud of you and proud of what you do and what all of the Comanche Nation does. Ben Tamakera. Yeah.
Wow, there's a bunch of people here. Yeah. I'm a proud Comanche. My great-great-grandfather, Quanah Parker, was a frequent visitor here. He was even invited to ride in the Coliseum. He always spoke well of the people of Fort Worth. Today, a statue across the street of him, that makes my heart happy and proud, as well as it does all of the Comanches. I retired from the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office after 30 years, and I guess you could say, as Hank Williams Jr. song goes, I'm making it a family tradition to be a part of Fort Worth. I'm honored to be accepted into the Texas Trail of Fame. I don't feel like I deserve it, but thank you for accepting me. I truly believe that the Great Spirit brought us all together here as an example of every one time enemies could live together in peace and harmony and always promote our heritage and our collective heritage. You know, over the years, I have been blessed and had the opportunity to study personalities. And I've learned through the years that us as family and friends, what we have got to do is to learn to argue, learn to fuss, and never losing sight of our love and respect for each other. Thank you.
I'd like for Donna Wani to come forward. She has a presentation from Chairman Coffey. And after that, I'm going to introduce Mona and Nona.
Ben is such a blessing to our tribe, and he does so much to keep the culture, history, and the awareness of our history and where our future is going as a Comanche Nation. And he's done so much work to preserve our Comanche Code Talkers and to honor them. And it's my pleasure on behalf of Chairman Coffey, our Comanche Nation Business Committee, and the great Comanche Nation for everything that you've done, not just for the state of Texas, but for Comanche Nation and everyone across these United States. I'd like to present with you a commemorative Comanche Nation Pendleton.
Well, Ben is an inspiration to many people, and he was the inspiration for the Quanah and Cynthia Ann Parker exhibit that the Holmes and I put together under his supervision, and that exhibit has gone to more than 30 places throughout this state, Oklahoma, and elsewhere. So it's that kind of inspiration that causes others to take an interest in the heritage that we have, and so we don't forget that. One of the things, speaking of not forgetting, one of the things I forgot to do when we're talking about the Code Talkers, we have Mona and Nona who would like to say something about their family and the Code Talkers. please come forward. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, a little bit short here. Mona and I are proud daughters of a Comanche code talker. We were unable to really understand the services and the duties that our father did in France. We had the pleasure of going there in June. We too hit Normandy Beach, Utah Beach, during the Normandy days. We were told once we hit the sand to turn around and look to see what Daddy had to go through. It wasn't until that day or that moment that it really hit us. We saw what Daddy did. He never ever spoke of what his duties and services were as a soldier. He was sworn to secrecy and took that to his grave. My sister and I are very proud of not just Daddy as a code talker, but of all our Comanche code talkers. We thank you very kindly for this blessed star. Thank you.
I want to be able to do that, but I don't think I can. But anyway, it's a wonderful sound. It certainly enlivens any event, that's for sure. Well, the next inductee is James D. Farmer. And when you look at this entire area and think about the what is here today, the question we need to remember is who was here at the very, very beginning. And James D. Farmer was one of the, he in fact created the Hoxie packing company that was here in the stockyards before Swift and Armour came. And he was one of the cattle dealers that was just intent upon making this Fort Worth and this area a great cattle market. So he later branched out and created the, first he created the Fort Worth Livestock Company, and then created the Rome Farmer Livestock Commission Company. He also served as, he was elected in 1902 as the first mayor of North Fort Worth, serving 2 terms. This was just before this area was merged or submerged into Fort Worth, and I know some of the old timers still are mad about that. But anyway, that's water over the dam, but the water over these dams flows slowly, I guess you could say. Anyway, he was also one of the leaders in creating the stock show. He was one of the first exhibitors, one of the initial exhibitors at the first stock show, cattle show. And he was also on the first publicity promotions committee of the stock show. So we're very delighted to be able to honor one of the other major people who made this area possible. And that was just shortly before Joe Dooley came. So anyway, our next, another early person in Fort Worth is Lawrence Steele. And I'm delighted that we're honoring one of the early pioneers, because he owned one of the first hotel restaurants in Fort Worth that was located then at the east side of Fort Worth, the Fort Worth Criminal Courts building. It was the stop for the first stagecoach coming to Fort Worth, which was the Fort Worth Jacksboro stagecoach line. He was generous in giving land and encouraging people to invest in Fort Worth. And so he was one of those early pioneers that made Fort Worth happen, because there were a lot of big setbacks in those early years. He also was the one who brought Mason the bell. And I'm surprised that Clara, wherever Clara is, she hardly goes anywhere without the bell. And but it is one of the largest, heaviest artifacts of early Fort Worth. And that is the bell that hung at Lawrence Steele's restaurant. And then later that bell was transferred to the Masons School. So, but that bell, think about it, that bell at that time was like our Facebook and Twitter. It's the only way that communications could go around. And the communications were for celebrations, festivals, but also for fires, for tragedies. So I don't know whether we were better off when we communicated by a bell or by Facebook and all that other stuff, but that's to be debated, I guess. Aaron Steele is here to accept the honor, and I think he will introduce some of his. There's a very large, they're a steely group of people, and they're here. So, Aaron Steele.
All right, on behalf of the Steele family, I'd like to thank the Texas Trail of Fame and Clara Rettle for nominating Lawrence Steele as one of the inductees. This may be a little bit of a repeat of what he just mentioned, but I want to give a few highlights of what Lawrence did for this city. Lawrence was born in Virginia in 1820 and moved to the Republic of Texas in 1840. In 1849, Major Ripley Arnold developed a fort overlooking the Trinity and called it Fort Worth. In 1850, the troops moved out of the fort and left it abandoned. That same year, multiple sets of families moved into the abandoned fort grounds, one of those being the Steele family. In 1854, Lawrence took over one of the concrete fort buildings and turned it into Fort Worth's first hotel and called it Steele's Tavern. During those times, it was called the Transcontinental Hotel, and it was based upon a concept of manifest destiny and the idea of the Western movement. Lawrence's Hotel was the first building that was seen coming into town and was the stopping point for the incoming stagecoaches. In his hotel, he installed a bell in the belfry, and the bell was made in 1782 England, was Fort Worth's bell. It rang for every event Fort Worth had. It rang for births, deaths, weddings, and school events. In 1855, Lawrence was one of a group of men that created Fort Worth's first Masonic Lodge, in which he was elected senior deacon. The meetings of this group were held in one of the upper rooms of his hotel. In 1860, Lawrence was influential in getting Fort Worth as the county seat of Tarrant County. He donated his time, his money, and land to build a courthouse for the county. In 1861, the Civil War broke out. Lawrence worked men together to fight against the Union. He was chosen as Tarrant County's first lieutenant of the 7th Texas Cavalry Company K, and resigned in 1863 after being shot in the hip. After the war, Lawrence was chosen as a commissioner for Tarrant County, and he served 2 terms. In 1873, when Fort Worth was incorporated, Fort Worth held elections, and he ran for mayor. Lawrence ran against W.P. Burt's and lost the election just by a few votes. Hopefully, I've highlighted just a few reasons why he is so deserving of this award, and I see why he chose this area to live and settle. There have been 7 generations that have lived and grew up in Fort Worth since Lawrence's death. 5 of those 7 are represented in the crowd. And if I can, please ask the Steele family and those descendants to please stand up and raise their hand. Proud to accept this award on behalf of the Lawrence and the Steele family. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, one thing you can say about the Steele family, they're very productive. The next honoree is Pastor Chris is going to be introduced by George Westby. George never gets enough credit, but I'd like to give him special credit. You know, he does manage parking, but he is the only person in America that, in fact, when you park your car with him, your car gets a blessing, and it will be protected forever. George Westby to introduce Pastor Chris.
Thank you, Doug. You know, we created the Texas Trail of Fame to honor those individuals that created our Western heritage. And we want to teach others about our Western heritage and the lovely life, the wonderful life that we have, and the caring that we have in our hearts for one another. Riding for the brand, doing what you say you're going to do, treating others the way you want to be treated. Doug Harmon, several years ago, came into my office here in the Livestock Exchange building and said, I want you to meet somebody. He's got a cowboy church in Sweden. I see you're pulling my leg. Well, 2 years ago, my wife and I decided to go out and cross the pond and find out for ourselves. And we went to Sweden to see it for ourselves and found that it is much, much more than that. Chris is being inducted as a preservationist, but only because we don't have a category for an ambassador. Chris has built an entire western town and some 70 acres with the largest Texas flag, 20 by 38 feet, flying from a 75-foot flagpole out in front of the entrance to his Lone Star Conference Center. Now, next to the flagpole is a pump jack, which produces no oil, but it does produce a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity. In his town out there in southern Sweden, they've got 60 buildings, an arena, a dance hall, a Longhorn saloon, which serves sarsaparilla, a Western store outfitting those that want to look Western and dress that way, a bunkhouse that sleeps 200 people, and a restaurant that will feed up to 1,800 guests. But there's much more to it than that. Chris went down to Canton several years ago and bought an authentic chuck wagon. And he takes that chuck wagon around all around Europe, showing what cowboys cook, how they eat and feeding. He takes it to festivals, markets all over Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Australia, and Africa. He has introduced our Western heritage to more than 1 million people a year. And there have been over 200,000 people that have visited his Lone Star Center there. Now, if you all would like to have a little more information about Pastor Christer Sergalev's Kingdom Center and his Lone Star Center, there's some folks out there in the audience that have these little brochures, passports, and I'm sure they will be happy to share them with you. Am I right? Okay. We have an entourage of a dozen folks that flew all the way from Sweden to see this induction for our worldwide ambassador of Western Heritage, Pastor Christer Sergalev. We have his.
Wow, I want to learn that. We did that when we were small. Shall I have that first?
This is for you.
Wow.
This is my friend. Yeah.
Wow. I say like my new friend Ben, that I don't know if I deserve this, but I'm so honored and thankful for this reward. It's far beyond what I ever could think or imagine. And I'm not even a U.S. citizen. The closest I am is I'm an honorary Texan in the Republic of Texas. Official, yeah, official. I want to thank God, who my life is centered around, and I want to thank my family, my wife Helena and Gideon, that was born 1 pound, and he's a bull rider until he sees the bull. But that's and all my people that work with me in Sweden, because this is impossible. It takes a lot of people and devoted people, and I want you to stand up so people see the Swedish cowboys. Yeah. And I want to thank the hundreds of people in Texas and US that have taught me and my people so much of the spirit of the West and Western living. And I first of all Want to thank Douglas Harmon. That was the first cowboy I met when I come here 2000 here to Stockyards. Wow. And you did a big impression on us. And I've talked about you all over. And George Westby, Coy Hoffman, Jeff Copenhaver, and especially Jack Edmondson that have taught me to speak English with a Texas accent. So I really love him. And I want to thank the people at the American Hats, Keith Maddox and Keith Mundy, for teaching me and my people the other day about what a hat means and how you had to live up to your hat. And I mean, the boots and the belts is important, but the hat. And we were performing in Africa, Lagos, Nigeria, for 500,000 people under one roof. So if you think Texas is big, that was big. And the whole choir there, the black choir, had cowboy hats, and we were doing our performance. So that is what we're doing. So I feel I'm a part of the Texas history. In 1934, Charles Sanko was coming to Texas with his father. And he was from Denmark, very close where I live. And where I live had belonged to Denmark. So it's the same, he's coming from where I live. And he was joined in 1835. He was joined into first volunteers of Lynchburg. And they think that he was doing the first flag. He was a painter. And he was doing that flag with a one star and independence. And and he died in the Alamo. But he was doing the flag, so I think I have the right to have the flag flying over there. It's coming from us, from a guy. So, and the first Swede, Svante Svensson, came to Texas in early 1840s and became very good friend with Sam Houston, who urged him to recruit Swedish immigrants. In 1848, he was coming with 25 Swedes, and they were settled down east of Houston. And in the year 2000, census showed that there are 160,000 people that have Swedish roots in Texas. Yeehaw for those. And year 2000, I came to Stockyards in Fort Worth. After trying to pay for parking in these strange parking meters, I fell in love with Texas and the cowboy life. Because my calling is in Sweden, I can't move to Texas. So I moved Texas to Sweden. Texas didn't send me, I sent myself. So I hope I like it. And building an ambassador there. Texas is not a geographic definition. It's a mind thing. It's a belief system. It's about friendship, honesty, good self-image, being humble. A Texan is always humble. Helping people in need. A handshake is enough. Everything is big. Nothing is impossible. You can do it. That's why we created 70 acres of Texas in Sweden. Our motto is Texas, closer than you think. I'm so blessed to be an ambassador for two countries, the Kingdom of God and Texas. We have met millions of people, and not one of them have a negative attitude towards Texas and Western. People in the rest of the world think that all cowboy things comes from Texas. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, cowboy hats, everything is Texas. Finally, be proud, keep the spirit of Texas, and God bless Texas, and God bless Sweden. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless.
In the 1960s, he began writing books that were very popular, some going almost to 30 reprints. But the Ben Green, they're stories, individual stories. And one of my favorites was the one where he was talking about the guy, one of the horse traders, that in fact gave a little poison to the horses just before they were to be sold. So it enlivened them for at least a short period of time, I guess before they died. But anyway, there were all kinds of techniques, and I think some of those old timers that were around the horse and mule barns here just really created such interesting stories. He wrote 10 books horse trading was the first one that became so popular in 1967. Titles of his book, each of the stories having its own kind of little title, but Getting Even was one of my favorite stories about how they would trade back and forth, and it was really who at the end got the best of the other person was kind of the story that was so important. But Ben Green books are just incredible, and Red Steagall is the closest thing to Ben Green that I can think of, because Ben was a veterinarian and he encapsulated really a piece of the Western heritage. I don't know, Ben, Red, do you want to say anything about Ben Green? I haven't asked. He doesn't know. Okay. All right. Okay. Good. All right. Anyway, it's but I think all the different people, whether it's Joe Dooley, Ben Tomacara, the Code Talkers, all are pieces of a big puzzle, and the big puzzle is our American heritage of the West. And I think they all add something, and so it's important to recognize this. So Ben Green, the author, the veterinarian, and the most famous horse trader I think that ever lived, is now inducted into the Trail of Fame. The final, thank you, please, yeah, thank you. And I bet over at the trapping show, there are probably copies of the Ben Green books over there. I think Billy Huckabee, I'm sure, has some for sale that he will autograph and increase the price on those books appropriately. So anyway, the last one to be honored is Billy Dixon, and a very famous Western cowboy or rifleman. And anyway, we're very pleased that today we have the last surviving person who was with Billy Dixon at the Adobe Walls, and it's a guy by the name of John. I don't know where John is. Is John coming? Oh, there he is. Yeah, here is John Wayne, who was with Billy Dixon.
Now it's my dubious honor to take you folks back to a time before the red men in white were friendly, before the peace, when there was hostility and conflict. I have to tell you the story of Billy Dixon. Now, the fellow was born in 1850 in that part of Northern Virginia that would become West Virginia 10 years later. He'd serve as a mule skinner, a buffalo hunter, an Army scout, and finally a sheriff. Tall, good-looking fella, kind of lean, and wore his hair long as a taunt to the Indians. And more than once, that scalp nearly ended up on a Comanche Braves lodgepole. Well, you tried. At the Battle of Buffalo Wallow, Billy Dixon and a handful of others held off a large war party of Indians, and for that he won a Medal of Honor. But more famous was the Battle of Adobe Walls 3 months earlier, June in 1874. Billy Dixon was one of 28 men that were at that little settlement north of the Canadian River in the Texas Panhandle. Another fella there was a 21-year-old fella by the name of William Barclay Masterson, be better known later as Bat Masterson. And another fella there was, well, it was me. I don't think that's funny. Anyway, we were hunting buffalo in Comanche territory. We were slaughtering them by the hundreds, by the thousands. We were taking away the Comanche way of life. They didn't appreciate that. We'd heard stories that some buffalo hunters out on the prairie had been killed. We felt we were pretty safe at Adobe Walls. Wasn't much of a settlement. 4 buildings, 2 stores, a saloon, and a blacksmith shop. But we felt the Indians wouldn't dare attack us there. What we didn't know was the Comanche medicine man, Isate. There's no one here related to Isate, is there? I don't want to know that. He'd had a vision. He had medicine. He said that the Comanches who attacked Adobe Walls would be impervious to the white men's bullets. So Chief Quanah Parker put together a large war party, 400 or 500 braves. They rode to attack Adobe Walls. We got up that morning before dawn, ready to get an early start on a buffalo hunt, when all of these Indians came galloping out of the dawn. But I have to tell you, Isate's medicine was no match for a Sharps rifle in the hands of a skilled buffalo hunter. Those Comanche warriors were the bravest men I ever saw. Kept coming, galloping back, and we kept shooting. End of the day, the Comanches withdrew. We'd had 3 dead, and they'd lost many times that. They came back the next morning. Now, Quanah Parker wasn't pleased with Isate, wasn't pleased with his stories of the medicine. Isate said, well, it was because on their way to Adobe Walls, a skunk had passed in front of their route there, and Isate said that skunk stole my medicine. Quanah Parker said, from now on, I'm going to call you Polecat. Well, that morning, Quanah Parker and Isate, a few other chiefs, and some warriors were on a bluff just about a mile away from Adobe Walls. Quanah still had the superior advantage, and he was considering another attack. Back at Adobe Walls, we knew that if something happened, if we could take off one of those leaders, we discouraged the Indians from attacking. But a shot that would go a whole mile, no one had ever done that before. Folks said that Billy Dixon was a good shot, and we encouraged him to try. He raised that Sharps up. He was accounting for the wind and the elevation and squeezed that trigger. We watched for a couple of seconds, seemed like an eternity. We saw Quanah's horse rear up. We saw Isate fall to the ground. That was the end of the Battle of Adobe Walls. The Comanches withdrew. Everybody at Adobe Walls was cheering Billy Dixon. He was trying to say it was just a lucky shot. But that shot would go down in history as the greatest shot of the 19th century, and he would be called the greatest marksman of the West. That's the recorded history. But I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. Just a few years later, we were passing through Wyoming, Billy and I, and stopped at a saloon. The editor of the local newspaper, name was Mr. Peabody. He heard we were there and came to interview us. We got to talking about Texas, and the story of Adobe Walls came up. Billy started to narrate it, but I'd had a drink or 2 or 10. I decided it was time to set the story straight. I said, Billy, you're a heck of a shot. Probably the best shot north of the Canadian River, next to me. When we were there at Adobe Walls, I didn't think you could handle that shot. I was standing back in the shadows, back between the saloon and one of the stores. I saw you about to squeeze that trigger off. I snapped out my 6-gun, let off a shot, and all I'm going to tell you, Billy, your shot was pretty good. Hit the ground right in front of Quanah's horse, caused it to rear up. But my .45 knocked Isate off the horse. So I'm telling Billy this, and I could tell from his eyes he knew I was telling the truth. We looked over at Mr. Peabody, though, and he'd been writing down notes. He stopped, started to tear the paper up. Billy said, "Why, Mr. Peabody, aren't you going to print the real story?" Mr. Peabody said, This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, so that's the way it happened, folks. That's the real way. Billy Dixon gets the credit, but I'm the fellow what shot Isate Polecat.
It's really Jack Edmondson, ladies and gentlemen, and you might think he's John Wayne, but he thinks he is, so it's all right. But anyhow, once again, I want to thank Doug and Clara and George and Jack for all that they do. Got to thank old Nate Krieger over here. Nate kind of helps us all days and all nights, and you know, some of us call it funny hours. Nate kind of takes care of the Trail of Fame's business. But once again, I want to thank all of you for coming to the Red Steagall Cowboy Gathering, our induction here. Thank all you inductees and your families and all you foreigners and funny talking folks from wherever you're from. But thank you. Please, everyone, enjoy the day.